You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld. I'm so happy today to have my guest, George I. George, I guess it's good morning for you. You are in Chicago. I'm in New York. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me here. This is great to see you again.
It's great to see you. George, you and I crossed paths a few years ago. You spoke at one of the civic design conferences that we hosted and produced, and it was interesting to learn about your work. I know that you are co-founder of Greater Good Studio in Chicago, and it seems like there's a lot of really I was going to say altruistic, but I think a better term would be good-hearted people in the design world that are based in Chicago. I'm thinking of the UX for Good folks like Jason. I think it's pronounced Stulizek. But maybe there's something in the waters of Lake Michigan that just sort of wash over designers in Chicago and just make them both really good at what they do and full of goodness and humanity.
Possibly. I do credit this town as being a really great home base for a studio like ours because I think there was a lot of apprehension around can a business like this actually work. So, we technically are a regular for-profit business, but we do a very good impression of a nonprofit. So, our focus exclusively is to work with other nonprofits, foundation, and government clients. So, we don't do any commercial business, any commercial design business. And to do this kind of work in a city like New York or San Francisco, I think would have been a lot harder because the enormous pressure for rent would have really crushed, I think, a small team like ours. So the kind of runway we got here in Chicago, I think kind of makes it a fairly ideal spot. But then also don't forget, like Chicago has a pretty good base historically for being socially minded because it was a strong union town for a long time. Was the site of the DNC riots during the
Mm-hmm.
60s for civil rights, and has been a bedrock for civil movement because there's been so much labor here. So yeah, I think it's a appropriately well placed home base for our studio. I don't think we were that strategic. We just that's where we are.
It
But
worked out.
retroactively, it sounds very strategic.
Well, so you know, if you're listening, folks, George sounds like just a kind of lovely, warm, relaxed person, and yet, he is known as one of the pissed-off optimists who produces something called the angry hour in many cities. And so you're George, like you don't sound pissed off or angry, but what's going on? You are
Yeah,
we got all these like very harsh adjectives to describe some of the things you're involved in.
yeah. I think the term "pissed off optimist" was something that Sarah, my co-founder, and I had kicked around for a long time. And in other conversations I've had, I've cited her as being where it came from, and I believe she has cited me as being where it came from. So I don't think either one of us can tell now who originally said it or when. But we've had it kind of like as a term internally since the beginning of our studio to describe somewhat ourselves, but also people that we need to find who are pissed not because they're just so like grumbling, but rather because they can see how broken things are and are rightfully upset. Like, what the hell is this? This, whatever this is, doesn't seem to be right. And I think there's a moment right now, we're in our second term of lunacy
Mm-hmm.
to, I think, justify a lot of things to be pissed off about. And yet, when we say the pissed off optimist, we always are trying to see how we can balance the kind of hope and sense of healing or repair or just a general faith in humanity that we can still do something about this. And I think if we were just optimists, like blank optimists, and just said we're optimists, or blank pissed, either one extreme, I think, is not going to quite help us get to where we need to. I think we need to recognize how broken things are and not lose faith. I think we need to be optimistic that things can be better, but not do so in a way that feels disconnected from how, people's lives are fairly in danger and at risk right now. So I think balancing two extreme opposite views at the same time is something that I think we need to do. It's how we think of ourselves. And actually, it's been interesting in that we've found that resonance in every client we've ever worked for and every person we've ever hired. So I don't think many people kind of walk around saying, "Hey, I'm a pissed-off optimist," but that term tends to describe people who have gotten this work and gotten us. So we started thinking, actually, this could be a thing. We should maybe say it out loud more. So we've been kind of casually saying it more and formally saying it for the last 3, 4 months now, even though we've been using it internally for about 14 years.
Wow. It's interesting that, yeah, I had no idea that you had been using it internally, and yet it just like so recently that it's become a broader thing. Uh, uh, you know, I guess you're way ahead of your time. Uh, how is this playing out? So you're doing these angry hours, and talk a little bit more about what the sort of broader manifestation of pissed off optimism looks like.
Yeah, it turns out, you see, that when we think about our clients and people we've hired under this term, that the path to becoming an employee at the Greater Good Studio or being a client is a pretty narrow path. But that doesn't mean that there aren't more people who are pissed off optimists or in the world who are on any type of journey, whether, I don't know if they're aspiring to become employees or clients of ours, but have that same mindset of understanding, hey, look, things are really in need of work, and yet I think I can help. That attitudinal alignment actually is actually for somewhat common. I wouldn't say it's universal, but it's more common than you might think. And I think what we realized is that if we started using this term that went from internal to external, we might have more people go, "Oh, wait, there's a name for that? Huh, I've always thought of myself in this way. Okay, maybe somebody finally gave me language for this feeling." And what we wanted to do was say, if you have felt this way for a long time, didn't know there was a name, or it makes sense, can you come and hang out with us at a happy hour? So for a long time, right until like the last week, we are about to launch this ticketed event in Chicago, the happy hour for Pissed Off Optimists. And then I think Sarah was doodling one day at a conference or at some meeting. It goes, "Happy hour?" Question mark. And she sent me a picture of it on a with a text and said, "Is this it? Like, could this be the right name?" I said, "Angry." Oh, good. That's pretty good. I immediately thought, oh, that's pretty funny. So we checked it with a couple of people, like, is this too much? And I said, no, 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 we get it. And it stuck. So we've been doing these events now in a few different cities. We've actually done 4 sold-out events, each one ticketed, and they've been raising money for a local nonprofit, which has been fantastic to do. Right now, the date is what, July 11th. So the next one we have is in LA next week, and then a couple of weeks later, in August, is one in Milwaukee, and I'm working on something in London, which I still can't quite land because I'm going to go back to see my family this summer. And what we've been finding is that when people come out, um, in some cases, like we just did one where my co-founder was hosting. She was in Austin, Texas, and she says, some of the guests have said to her, "I have not found a space like this anywhere.
Mm.
I don't know where I can find this type of space that is both a professional networking event where I can relax, where I can say some of this stuff out loud." And that maybe particularly because of that region, I think has been hopeful, leaving people with hope, leaving people with a sense of community, and that they don't have to be so isolated or feel like it's all in their head, that what they're seeing in the world, as crazy as things may be, for some people might feel as though, can nobody else see this? They keep
Hmm.
wondering, like, what is going on? Why can't we? If we don't say it out loud, does it not exist to you people? Like it's like making people kind of go a little stir crazy. So these angry hours have been a place for us to be able to acknowledge, yes, things are nuts right now, but we need each other if we're going to get through it.
So it's interesting when you were first describing this, the sort of almost binary aspect of, like having these two truths at the same time that don't necessarily seem to align. I was thinking, wow, a lot of people have a hard time jumping through those dialectical hoops. But um, are you finding? It sounds like you're finding actually that a lot of people are already there now. Are those people that tend to come from the design world or the more broad creative or knowledge worker worlds, or is this just kind of across the board?
So this is something we didn't see coming at all. We heard repeatedly from each of the events we've done how it is drawing people from so many different industries. Yes, because I think from design there will be a bunch because that's been our origin for a long time. But also there are people from like social work, people from housing, people from philanthropy, people who work as a nurse, people who are, different industries and different roles at different levels. And it sort of struck me. I thought, oh, I don't know if I know of networking events that are in a professional setting where you aren't already in a track versus something like this, which is cutting across so many different industries that if you are in a track-based networking event, which I think is the norm, where you go for a networking event because you went to that particular grad school program,
Hmm.
or went to get the MBA, you went to that nursing school, you were a member of the Realtors Association, whatever those things might be, that affinity group, you might go and technically you're bound by those other people because of this relationship, but you may not necessarily like everyone there. You might end up going, oh, I don't know kind of what this person's views are on this, and you kind of find your tribe within it, and that's fine. But here, what I've heard from my attendees, like, this is my people, without knowing that there was but the boundary isn't by professional identity. It's bound now by an attitudinal alignment. And I'd hoped maybe something like that would happen, but it's been fascinating to see people coming from all these different walks of life, a wide range of ages and professional levels of positional power, and coming together saying, "Oh, we're this is the people I've been missing. These are the people I feel like I can be relaxed with, and we can say things out loud, and I can maybe do projects or work or some other type of like follow up with." Because I was both a little surprised and also really relieved that something like that would happen because it wasn't something on our radar. Maybe we'd hoped secretly, but it's been fascinating to see how much it has cut across a lot of spaces.
Well,
Um,
there's like a lot of discussion of sort of how communities are realigning over the last couple decades, and I remember seeing this with professional associations as one thing I'll pick on because it's a hobby horse of mine. But uh, when some of us were getting our professional training and education, and we were aligning with a discipline that had it may have had conferences, it may have had publications, magazines, a canon of books, uh, maybe most importantly, a vocabulary that
mm,
was unique to that group. And we certainly have seen this in the design world where years ago when someone would hear the term, let's say, interaction designer or user researcher or information architect, and they said, oh, I guess that's what I am.
mm,
I'm not alone in the world in what I'm doing. And the conferences became a place that were so important to those people because once a year they were seen and understood and could find peers and then the rest of the year they'd go back to work and back to being isolated.
mm,
That's changed in a dramatic way just in well, COVID certainly accelerated it, and we've seen a lot of breaking down of how certainly people in our industry see themselves and how they commune. And, uh, we don't necessarily see the interaction design chapters getting together in Chicago and Austin and so forth any longer. Those things have fallen apart. So I find it fascinating to see new configurations, new types of networks. Now, like it seems that you're tapping a feeling as the sort of pulling together the unifying characteristic
mm.
of this particular group or community. My question for you is that sustainable? Is it is it always going to be characterized, do you think, by the anger? And God knows, like, it feels like we're always going to have more and more to be angry about at this rate. But does it need to evolve? Are you already seeing it evolve and to sort of reframe itself to become
Yeah, I mean, I think
sustainable?
I'd say there's a timeliness to our launching of this at the beginning of the year. With our first event was there in, I think, March in Chicago. So that's pretty fresh from Trump being inaugurated. And within those first 90 days or so, so many different things to be upset about, and so many sort of like dismantling of social norms. I think USAID had only just recently been doged, so that's what $50 billion worth of funding. I mean, that like the kinds of things now that seems kind of like cute now because we've already been multiple months since that. Now it's just like we have people being whisked off the streets in places like in
Yeah.
LA and then probably in Chicago and other century cities. So the constant escalation of authoritarianism is definitely on the rise. It would seem, I think, perhaps inappropriate for us to capitalize on that because I don't think that was the goal. And like I said, because we've been using the term for a long time, it is a fairly constant state of just observation. If you aren't, if you, it's not to say if you're not upset, maybe you weren't paying attention, but there's a lot of things that I think are in the world that seem quite unjust. And I think the attitude of being pissed about it, to me, is a reminder that, hey, you should notice maybe that there are more things to be upset about. If you're like completely unperturbed, and just having a grand old time, maybe you are experiencing a lot of insulation that is protecting you from what for others is a daily reality of I think uncertainty and fear. So that to me I find upsetting. Could it last beyond this administration? I think so. There's a tiny piece of me that worries that this administration isn't going to let go of power.
Hmm.
So that might persist for a lot longer than just this next 3 years. But I also feel like being able to make sure that we continue to have places for hope and reality together, to me, is something I think I believe can sustain. So whether it's an angry owl or um, as yet unannounced, but there is a future gathering that we're planning that's a little more substantial. Um, that I think will be a thing that we will well, I don't know. Reality, I don't know, but
Well,
we have a hunch that that there will be enough reason for people to gather that we will have to keep meeting that moment.
like any community leader, you have to kind of let it go in its direction and help it along, whatever that direction is. I want to, and that really depends on the people who show up and
Yeah.
what they want. So I want to, after the break, dive into what the people are doing at these events and where what they get out of it and what you're seeing them do with that energy once it's been sort of refocused through the prism of one of these experiences. So we're going to do that right after the break. Everyone, we're talking with George I, a Pissed-Off Optimist, and you are listening to the Rosenfeld Review. We'll be right back. I'm going to give you 5 reasons you should be using the Rosenverse. First one, where else are you going to find 100 events that you can attend for free every year, 2 a week, about product management, product design, and UX design, plus a highly engaged Slack-based community of over 13,000 of your peers. What else are you going to find in the Rosenverse? You'll find hundreds and hundreds of recordings of conference presentations and community session recordings, all in one place from a single search browse interface. And behind those hundreds of recordings are hundreds of experts, people who have advanced the field, people who are your peers who are doing interesting new things, all in one place. Why else should you use the Rosenverse? We've been advancing the field of UX since 2005. You're going to find the most advanced content on such topics as design operations and program management, UX research, and a host of other topics from climate UX to civic design to how designers can work better in product organizations. Lastly, you've been trusting our content since we started back in 2005. Whether it's our books, our conferences, our community sessions, well, we think you're going to trust the way we've brought those all together so that you can spend less time searching and browsing and more time learning and benefiting. I hope you'll try out the Rosenverse, and I hope you'll consider upgrading to a gold paid membership because it brings you a lot more. Not only do you have access to hundreds and hundreds of recorded conference presentations, but you also get access to the Rosenbot, which is a ChatGPT 4 level chatbot that we've been training on all of our content, including our growing collection of nearly 60 books and counting. It's all there. It's all great content, and the Rosenbot is a cutting-edge way to get at it. You can try the gold membership out with a trial for 2 weeks. Give it a try. Hope you like it. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld. I know how to pronounce my name, but I made an absolute rookie podcaster mistake. I've done like 250 of these, and I got my guest's name mispronounced. George A.
Thank
I'm
you.
so sorry, George. My apologies. Are
It's
you
a
gonna storm off this podcast now, or can
That's
we
right. I'll
keep
flip the
going?
table. It's a Burmese name, and it is unfortunately spelt like a ship's captain type of calling. But no, it's just a. No worries.
AA Captain. Sorry, bad joke, but
No worries. No worries.
got it. All right, George. So we were going to talk a little bit about what you might find if you attended an angry hour, and what might happen at one, how that energy not only impacts the people who participate, but how they might take it forward from there.
Yeah, so we've been so pleased and so slightly surprised at just the level of response. So in each of the locations, the struggle has often been how many people can we fit, and can we find a venue that is willing to go and stick their neck out with this like drink ticket thing. And when people arrive, usually then they kind of settle in. And there's we've designed this name tagged so that people can write down obviously who they are, but they write down and choose what am I pissed off about or what am I optimistic about,
Mm,
as like a small icebreaker. And that has helped people sometimes go, oh my God, finally I have a place to write it down. Or some people get all paralyzed and go, oh my God, there's too many questions. And they have to sit and think about it, go get a drink. But it has been a helpful way. We've been integrating also a few more things because we've heard feedback from some of the sessions we've done where because there's not more prompts, it can be hard to sometimes just like go up to someone and start chatting. So we've been creating more conversation starters, like little cards left on tables to kind of ease some of that transition for those who want in their natural state just talk to anyone they ever meet. What we've been finding is that because since we've been doing them, people are walking home with them because they oh, these are really good conversation starters, and they ask thankfully and say, hey, can I take this to my office now? I say, sure, go ahead. So people have been really responding to those as well. And what we usually do is make sure that there's some time to kind of just, settle in, meet some of the community members. And then we usually is a small moment for myself to gather the room, introduce Greater Good Studio, introduce myself, explain what Angry Hour is and who is it for, and then hand off to a local nonprofit partner that we have had each time that we've done this work. Usually at the end of the session, at the end of the night, we tally up all of the expenses we've had, and then all the revenue and the proceeds is what we then make a donation to the local nonprofit. And that has meant that the local nonprofit representative is usually there to be able to speak to the work that they do. So our sense that when we go to another town, when we've traveled, is that we don't have a lot of community or standing locally on the ground until we've maybe met people. But there's usually a nonprofit that's been there for years. So
mhm.
we'd rather highlight them because they're going to be people who are sticking around, not us, once we leave. That we'd rather have a place for people who are locally in that town, Philadelphia, Austin, wherever, making connections with a local nonprofit who is already there. And then we can kind of step back out of the way.
What's an example of some of the nonprofits that
Yeah,
you work with?
so in Chicago, we work with a great group called the Chicago Community Jail Support, who I've done personally volunteering with, where folks are every night actually standing outside of Cook County Jail, helping those who've been released, who've been detained, get back home typically, make phone calls, get a bus ride, whatever it might be, just because usually when they get ejected from Cook County, uh, there's no money, there's no cell phone, no keys, no laces on their phone, from their shoes. It's
Mm.
pretty derelict. And in the middle of winter, without a jacket, it's hopeless. So it's very cruel, is what we've seen as an experience. So we've done went on to I think it was Philadelphia, and we worked with a group called the Youth Sentencing Reentry Project. That's again criminal justice, but even more heinous in that there's a lot of instances where there are young individuals who've been put into prison much earlier than really ever should have been. And because of the life-changing impact that it has, it can be really disastrous for them. So they do a lot of like local on the ground work. It's not always criminal justice, but there have been other groups that we've worked with. GAVA, so Go Austin, Vamos Austin in Austin,
Hmm.
Texas. And the one that's coming for LA is called Shirla, CHIRLA. That one is a heavy immigration focus, just because obviously LA is at the intense scrutiny from ICE agents right now. So picking somebody that was appropriately linked to that issue, it seemed appropriate. So whenever we do that, we're trying to see, would you be willing to partner with us? Um, we are implicitly borrowing some of their social capital and wanting to make sure that we can not only raise money for them, but have them meet to seem to us feel like a critical component of how an Angry Hour should work. Because again, when we travel to another place, we're not going to be sticking around for 20 years, but those organizations already are. So maybe the goal is to simply spot a highlight using our social capital and then go back into the background.
Well, and it's an amazing model. I love this model because it's like tapping into this energy that a lot of people have that doesn't have a direction, and you're actually giving them a local direction
Yes.
and helping a local organization that may need a blast of new energy or whatever. But um, do you find that those organizations then also get a new blast of volunteer support or
We don't know, but that's the hope. Certainly, there's a bit of a little bit of cash. It's not a lot by any stretch for the money that we raise, but the awareness and the ability to then sign up for their newsletter, volunteering events. I mean, there's a number of different connections that I think most nonprofits are looking for. The one that we're organizing right now in Milwaukee is interesting in that a nonprofit reached out to us and said, "Can you bring Anger Out to us in Milwaukee?" We're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, actually, maybe that could work." So that was the first time we've had an actual request as opposed to us going to a town and then saying, "Is anybody interested in partnering with us? Please, 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 come join us for this Angry Hour. We're going to help bring and spotlight you guys." So uh, I think things are shifting. It's interesting. People are starting to notice. But I'd say somewhat strategic on our part because we didn't know if we could pull this off. We have had dreams for a long time about wanting to do a in-person gathering around the idea of of pissed-off optimists, like a big gathering of pissed-off optimists. And the way to soft test this, which is kind of what designers tend to do, is to run a prototype. Can we gather 10, 20, 30 people for drinks for 2 hours after work on a Tuesday? Let's give it a name. So hence the Angry Hour. And once it started selling, we're like, oh, actually, this might start to work. And we've done it. And now we're like Chicago, New York, uh, Philadelphia, Austin, uh, and yeah, Milwaukee, LA is coming up. We're seeing that yes, it's resonating. Let's commit to something a little bigger. So we are planning on announcing something in probably early to mid August. Tickets for a in-person conference. It will be called the Livid Conference, a gathering for pissed off optimists. It'll be in Chicago. The latest it could possibly be before it turns too cold is November. So very early November is when it's being planned. November 3rd. We have room for about 150 in-person tickets and then lots and lots of Zoom. And we have a hunch that it will work. It is a slightly risky move because we've done one time a Zoom conference. We did something called the Restorative Design Conference in 2020. That was very popular. We were very surprised at that. We had something like 900 online Zoom attendees, and we raised a bunch of money for that one. But this one is a little more focused on establishing the Pissed Off Optimist brand, establishing this as a community, and it being more like a coming out moment for us. Because I think there's something significant about us trying to do this work when the very sector of social sector work is being directly under threat by this administration. I think it's important that we meet now. And I think if we had done it for giving ourselves more time to do it, let's say in April when the weather's better again, I think we may miss the moment. And I worry this gets very dark kind of quickly, but I worry that if we don't utilize the fact that we have the freedom to do it now in Chicago, which is a sanctuary city, there may be a time when we don't have
Mhm.
that safety. And I worry that if we waited another year, something even worse happens, and then we go, shit, we should have done it. So I feel a real urgency to do something important like this, and I'm trying to not completely break the team because we don't have a lot of time, but I feel like we have to do it now.
Well, George, briefly, I'm sure there are things you could use, whether it's people in different cities volunteering venues or something else. What do you need, and how can people reach you?
Well, you can always come. I'd say probably the best thing is connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always ready to be connected to there, and send messages through that platform is very helpful. Join our newsletter because I think that's how we communicate when future Angry Hours are happening, and when the Livid Conference goes live, we'll definitely be using our channels there.
We'll make sure
Uh,
links are in the show notes.
yeah, thank you. And I think just like keep an eye on just keep up with our work through the newsletter. I think goes a long way because we are trying to go from it's already hard enough just to do consulting work in the social sector, but I think we're going to try to become a little more um, consumer friendly, be a little more of make ourselves a little more available for people who are looking to do work without the contracting and invoicing structure of a typical consulting project, and maybe being a little more direct to consumer.
Hmm.
And I think to do that means we want to be more available through workshops and events, hence the need for, I think, creating this Pissed-Off Optimist brand as a new front door for us.
Amazing, amazing work, and it's amazing how the certain points in time, really in history, not always good ones, bring out some amazing human creativity, and what you're doing is a perfect illustration. We're going to have to wrap up in a moment, but in fine Rosenfeld Review tradition, George, what did you bring us for our listeners as a gift?
Yeah, so I have a recommendation for a book that I read, probably one of my favorites from last year. It's called Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. And technically, I listened to it, so I never read it. The audiobook was fantastic, and it does such a thorough job of dispelling many of the harmful myths and narratives about what makes poor people poor and what keeps them poor, and the idea that the ultra wealthy can have access to government handouts, and we call that stimulating the economy. But anytime we want to make a carve out or some type of accommodation for someone who's poor, we call that
Handout.
socialism or something else. Yeah, a handout or somebody like taking. I find it very, very problematic. So the book is really good.
So you mean
And I think
it's not their fault?
not their fault.
Oh,
And what I think his general thesis is that we can solve this if we tax our billionaires. It's actually fairly straightforward. And that the tax revenue from those billionaires being taxed appropriately, as opposed to being barely taxed at all, would fund the majority of the programs that I think we need. And it's a very, very cogent argument. It's a great book.
that and the defense budget. That's another conversation.
There you go.
George A., thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to a pissed-off optimist today.
Thank you, Lou.
Great to have you on the show.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen, and check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.